This woman's past experiences in life have made her keep herself distant from others, and because of that, she struggles to find love. Do you think she can ever break free from her past or remain enslaved by it? Grab your popcorn and let's dive in. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today, we'll be discussing a very interesting new Nigerian movie. Believe me, this is not your usual kind of movie. There's so much to learn from it. So stay tuned and listen carefully to this amazing story. The movie begins with a young, beautiful woman named Delma, who has just moved into her newly rented apartment. She spends time replacing the wall frames with her own pictures. Later that evening, as she relaxes with a glass of wine, she receives a call from a loan agency reminding her of her unpaid debt. Startled, she nearly spills her drink. Annoyed and frustrated, but still full of pride, she dismisses the caller rudely, saying they should let the poor breathe instead of suffocating them, before continuing with her drink. That night, Delma's brother, Obas, visits her. He informs her that he plans to bring in a roommate to share her apartment since she hasn't been able to pay the full rent, and he can't continue covering for her when the landlord asks for money. Delma disapproves of the idea, claiming she values her space and privacy and doesn't like sharing with anyone. She insists she just needs more time to come up with the money. Obas, not wanting to argue further, reminds her to tell the loan agency to stop calling him about debts he knows nothing about. Delma, feigning ignorance, sarcastically jokes that witches probably gave them his number. Amused, Obas bids her goodbye and leaves. That night, Delma calls a friend to share her struggles, but the friend advises her to pay her debt to avoid the loan agency's persistent calls. The next morning, a man from PHCN, the power company, comes to collect the electricity bill. Delma offers him a delicious meal as a bribe, which works, leaving her impressed with herself. She jokingly tells him he's welcome to eat at her place whenever she owes a bill, and he agrees. A few days later, Delma comes home to find a stranger in her apartment. Startled, she almost attacks him until he nervously introduces himself as her new flatmate. Furious, Delma calls her brother to express her anger at his decision to go against her wishes. When she notices the stranger eating her food, she becomes even more enraged, creating a commotion and scaring him before storming off. In her room, Delma calls her friend Femi, who works at the loan agency, to complain about the new flatmate. Femi advises her to accept the arrangement as it would ease her financial burden. However, when he reminds her again to repay her loan, she angrily ends the call. The next day, the flatmate, Pere, confronts Delma, claiming that since he paid 70% of the rent, he should have the master bedroom. Delma refuses and boldly states she'll refund his money, even though she's broke. A heated exchange follows before Delma retreats to her room. Later, Obas visits to mediate between his sister and Pere, but Delma rudely dismisses the meeting. Frustrated, Obas wonders how his sister can be both broke and proud. In private, he scolds her behavior, but Delma remains unrepentant and asks why he didn't find a female tenant instead. Obas explains that the woman he approached couldn't afford the rent, leaving Pere as the only option. He advises Delma to get a job, warning her that if she doesn't, Pere might take over the entire house next year. As he leaves, Delma receives another call from the loan agency, which she answers rudely before hanging up. The following day, Pere replaces Delma's picture frames with his own. Delma demands he remove them, but Pere refuses. After another argument, Delma intimidates him with sharp words, throws his frames away, and replaces them with hers, leaving Pere bewildered. Frustrated, Pere later decides to leave and asks Delma for a refund. However, her relentless insults escalate the situation, and after much back and forth, Pere changes his mind and decides to stay. Delma is left shocked and disappointed, while Obas supports Pere's decision and leaves them to their endless bickering. Pere threatens Delma, declaring that by next year, he'll pay the full rent and claim the house entirely, leaving her helpless but still full of pride. Days later, Pere, wanting to avoid further conflicts, created a merged picture frame featuring both himself and Delma and hung it on the wall, thinking Delma would appreciate the compromise. Unfortunately, Delma disliked the idea. When she confronted him, she found him wearing a wrapper, which led her to mock and humiliate him. The situation escalated as they began exchanging hurtful words, with neither willing to back down. Do you think these two can coexist under the same roof? Leave your thoughts in the comment section. The next day, Obas was called in to mediate the issue about the frame. To Delma's disappointment, Obas approved of it. When Delma asked Pere how he got her picture, Pere revealed he had found it on social media, noting that she was quite popular. This revelation enraged Delma, and she slapped him. Shocked and humiliated, Pere demanded that Obas warn his sister and stormed off. Obas immediately reprimanded Delma for her unruly behavior, warning her that her actions could cost him his job. One night, Pere returned home late to find the door locked. When he knocked, Delma refused to let him in, insisting that since he came back late, he should sleep outside. She left him stranded. What level of wickedness is this, guys? The next morning, Obas scolded Delma for locking Pere outside, explaining that it almost caused him to lose his job since he had been helping her out. He demanded that she apologize to Pere, but she refused, leaving him frustrated and helpless. This incident caused Pere to miss submitting an important document for a contract he was working on, leaving him deeply disappointed and angry. Later, Delma called Femi and casually mentioned how she had locked Pere outside. Pere overheard the conversation and, frustrated, vented his anger at her. He warned that if the missed contract cost him his opportunity, she would face his wrath. Delma, however, showed no remorse and exchanged sharp words with him before he left. That night, Pere's air conditioner broke down, and he couldn't sleep. Desperate, he approached Delma to ask if he could stay in her room for the night. Delma mockingly refused and shut the door in his face. The following morning, Delma woke up startled to find Pere standing by her bedside. When she demanded to know how he got in, he told her not to worry about it and offered her breakfast in bed. Suspicious of his intentions, she hesitated, but Pere assured her the food was safe before leaving the room. Shortly after, Femi called Delma to remind her about her loan repayment. But she changed the subject, instead discussing the surprise breakfast Pere had given her. It seemed Femi was her only real friend, as she always distracted him with gossip whenever he called about the loan. Is that even normal, guys? Later that day, a young man came to see Delma, but Pere attended to him first. The visitor raised his voice, demanding repayment of his money from Delma. Pere wasn't surprised. Inviting the man in, Pere served him food, and the man revealed that Delma had hired him to sabotage the air conditioners in both rooms, but had refused to pay him. Pere encouraged the man to demand his money directly from her. Delighted, the man agreed. When Delma returned, she was shocked to find the man creating a scene. Despite being broke, she arrogantly told him to leave and promised to pay him later. The man refused, demanding immediate payment. Pere, being kind-hearted, offered to pay the man $20,000 on Delma's behalf. The man happily accepted, even taking some food and juice on his way out. Delma, embarrassed but still acting ignorant, denied knowing anything about the situation. Pere, visibly disappointed, expressed his frustration with her before leaving. The next morning, Pere went to Delma's room to ask for wipes. Initially, she refused, but when Pere reminded her of her debt to him, she reluctantly agreed. Later that day, as Delma passed Pere in the living room, she surprisingly apologized for her behavior. Pere, amazed by the gesture, took the opportunity to point out that her terrible attitude was driving people away and warned that no man would want to marry someone like her. Feeling insulted and humiliated, Delma slapped him twice and walked away unapologetically, leaving Pere stunned. That same day, Pere called Obas to complain, warning that if Delma ever slapped him again, she would regret it. After Pere left, Obas reprimanded Delma harshly, expressing his deep disappointment. He lashed out, reminding her that her toxic behavior had isolated her from everyone. Delma tried to dismiss his words, claiming she was fine, but Obas called out her loneliness, bitterness, and hatred. His words pierced her deeply, and she finally broke down, revealing a dark secret. Obas was not her biological brother, but her cousin. She admitted that Obas's father had repeatedly abused her over the years, showing no regard for her emotional or physical state, even during her menstruation. Obas was shocked and horrified by this revelation, struggling to process it. Heartbroken and embarrassed, Delma left the room in tears. Later, she went to Pere's room to properly apologize for slapping him, and Pere accepted her apology. Just when Pere thought she had changed, Delma abruptly warned him to stay out of her business and not cross her line. This sudden shift in her demeanor left Pere puzzled, wondering how someone could switch personalities so quickly. Could Delma truly heal from her past? Or is she destined to remain trapped by it? The following day, after calling Delma multiple times without any response, Obas decided to check on her. When he arrived, Delma addressed him as the caretaker, instead of the brother she usually called him. Obas began apologizing for his harsh words the previous day and asked why she had kept such a painful secret from him for so many years. Delma brushed it off, saying she was glad she was finally free from her abuser. She also revealed that she didn't want him to hate her father, leaving Obas heartbroken and disappointed. He apologized for not realizing her pain earlier and assured her of his unconditional love. They embraced, sealing the moment with forgiveness and affection. Meanwhile, in Pere's room, he was lost in thought, deeply disturbed by what he overheard Delma reveal about her traumatic experience. He felt sad and worried for her. Back in Delma's room, she called Femi to apologize for the unpaid loan. She admitted she wasn't proud of owing him and promised to secure a job to repay the debt. Their conversation lightened, and they chatted happily. The next day, after an exhausting day of job hunting, Delma returned home and fell asleep in the living room. Pere noticed her and, concerned, brought her food to eat. He spoke to her kindly, urging her to eat, leaving Delma surprised and touched by his gesture. From that day on, Pere started caring for Delma, always looking out for her well-being. He even covered her with a blanket when she fell asleep, showing a softer side of himself. 5 days later, Delma became worried because Pere hadn't been home and his phone lines were unreachable. She called Obas and together they began searching for him. The next day, Obas brought troubling news. He informed Delma that the loan app she had borrowed money from had circulated her pictures online. Surprisingly, Delma was unfazed, even asking if the picture they used was flattering. However, her mood changed when Obas delivered more bad news. The house they lived in had been sold, and the 30% she had paid was refunded. Furious, Delma ranted about suing the landlord, but Obas explained that she had no legal grounds, leaving her feeling helpless. The following day, Delma answered a knock at the door and was shocked to see a young man with his luggage. The man, admiring her beauty, introduced himself as Femi, the representative from the loan app. Delma was stunned but welcomed him inside. They talked for hours, rekindling a friendly connection. That night, Delma reminisced about Femi's words, particularly how he expressed interest in her and asked her out on a date. For the first time in her life, she was preparing to go on a date with someone she considered a friend. The next day, Delma dressed beautifully for her date with Femi. However, when she opened the door, she was surprised to see Pere standing there, looking handsome. They stared at each other in mutual admiration, leaving them both puzzled and slightly flustered. Later that night, after returning home, Delma found Pere in the living room. He complimented her appearance and asked about her date. Unfortunately, Delma admitted it didn't go well and that she regretted going. Pere suggested they hang out for a movie night at home instead, and she happily agreed. That night, Delma excitedly got ready for their movie date while Pere prepared the room, ensuring everything was perfect. As they watched the movie, they began talking about their pasts. Pere revealed that he had overheard Delma's conversation about her uncle's abuse and admitted that he, too, had been a victim of abuse. However, he pointed out that the difference between them was how they handled their pain. He chose not to let it affect others, unlike her. Their conversation led to mutual forgiveness and understanding. Emotions ran high as they opened up to each other, and one thing led to another. They confessed their love, shared a passionate kiss, and eventually made love, staying together until morning. When they woke up, Pere once again professed his love for Delma. She felt immense happiness, knowing she had finally found someone who truly loved and cared for her. Days later, Pere and Obas were in the living room discussing the sale of the house when Delma came downstairs and casually called Pere babe, unaware that Obas was present. Shocked, Obas asked if he had heard correctly or if he was imagining things. Pere stood up and proudly introduced himself as Delma's boyfriend and soon-to-be fiancé. Obas, initially stunned, quickly joined in their happiness, expressing his joy for his cousin and her newfound love. Finally, it was time for them to vacate the house for its new owner. Before leaving, Perry surprised Delma by telling her she would never leave his house again. When she asked if he had a house, Perry revealed that he had purchased a new apartment and wanted to surprise her with it. Overjoyed, Delma accompanied him to see their new home, leaving in excitement and anticipation. This story highlights how our past experiences may shape us, but they don't define our future. We have the power to control how our past affects our lives. Love is a beautiful thing, often found in the most unexpected places. It teaches us to be open-minded and embrace change when it comes into our lives. Did you enjoy this story? If you learned something from it, please share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more interesting and up-to-date Nigerian movie stories. See you next time.